Mike Detillier on the Out of Bounds Show, brought to you by Sound and Communications. Sound systems for your football field, baseball field, arena, gymnasium, any level. They've worked with Power 5, G5, junior college, high schools, and video walls, law firms, any kind of technology company, CPA firms, video walls, sound systems powered by Sound and Communications, soundcomav.com. We welcome in our friend Mike Detillier, WWL Radio TV New Orleans. Mike D joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Okay, Mike, if they go after a unicorn and the unicorns say no at Texas A&M, like Urban Meyer and Chris Peterson and so on, who do you think? And Dan Lanning, I think, emphatically took himself off the table. He likes being at Oregon. Phil Knight's worth $44 billion. Who do you think could be in the top 2 or 3 for Ross Bjork?
I think certainly Elko at Duke, because he has the ties there. He was at A&M as Jimbo's defensive coordinator, and my understanding that he was in very good standing with a number of the high-ranking financial people there. So I would think he would be on top of the list, very high at this stage. But I do know from just being involved in certain searches that a lot of times it's the person you may not be thinking about. And money is not going to be an object here at all. They have an unlimited amount of money that they can go after a coach. So I think just off the surface, Elko from Duke would be real high on the list. But I wouldn't necessarily scratch other people off. And don't take what coaches say to the media at face value. I hate to break it to everybody, but coaches do lie, okay? And they sometimes don't tell you the full truth about certain things. But I think this search will be very quick, very fast, and they'll have somebody in place for at the end of the year.
Okay, let me throw out a couple of names. Mike Norvell, Jeff Brom.
I'd be surprised with Norvell if he would leave Florida State to go to A&M.
Okay, Jeff Brom at Louisville, Lane Kiffin.
I'd be a little bit surprised with Lane. It's not where I think eventually he will end up. Jeff Brom is an interesting name. And because of his background, because of his success, I think certainly it's going to have to be a connect the dots with somebody there. And just remember years ago, the connect the dots with Jimbo really was Scott Woodward, who was at A&M at that time. And the money people bought into it to bring in Jimbo. At this moment, I think what you're seeing in college football more and more is that schools are not being run by necessarily the president, heads of department, athletic directors. They're being run by financial people who are willing to give up a lot of their money, and in exchange, I have a say on what goes on. And at A&M, it's, I think, obvious who's running the show there. The people with really deep pockets that are willing to spend whatever it takes to bring in who they think is the best candidate.
So you like outside of Elko, who would you what are the names? Who would be right behind him?
Well, I would get that caller, Urban Meyer. I want him to tell me no. It's Scott Woodward has said this numerous times. I remember Sam Jankovic, who was at Miami, had a similar type comment of that. I want him to tell me no. Okay, if you think that they're the best candidate, tell me no. And, Scott has always brought up about sometimes the obvious names are the people that tell you no quickly. It's sometimes the guy out of the blue. Brian Kelly here at LSU was not an obvious name. Look how many people's names were brought up, and it was not Brian in the conversation. Early on at LSU, it was not. It was Jimbo. It was Mel Tucker, who was I think the choice of the president of LSU at that time. I think he was the president's choice. We heard Lincoln Riley. Matt Rule. And then all of a sudden at the end, who comes rolling in? Brian Kelly.
Yeah.
And so $10 million a year gets your attention.
No doubt.
It does get your attention. Coaching in the SEC. A&M, because of the tremendous amount of financial resources they have and the ability to use that not only to get a coach, but involved with players and NIL deals, transfer deals, it's going to attract a major league type individual that we are not speaking of today.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just telling you, money, people can say, oh, well, money don't change my life. Yeah, right. I'm just telling you, finances is a big part of this game today in college sports.
Sure.
And it attracts people that you would not think would even take a second look at that job. But there's always a connection. And I go back to Woodward sort of was running the show at A&M when they hired Jimbo. And his connection, because he was at LSU at the time Jimbo Fisher was an assistant coach there, kind of how all this sort of lays down. But the financial people there at A&M will have the final say. It doesn't matter what people, who's the AD or the president says. We all know that we live in a different world of college sports. You can like it or not like it, but it is reality.
Sure.
That people that's going to give tens of millions of dollars are just not going to give it away and say, well, you don't have to worry about me getting involved with it. No, they always involved with it.
Right.
Because if you have that type of money, you're involved in businesses where you have the final say. Right. And guess what? They're going to have the final say on who's the head coach at A&M.
Okay. So, and it's probably going to cost total like $150 million once they buy everybody out, support staff, bring in a new coach at around $10 million a year with the new support staff. I mean, and I know they've got it, but it's a chunk.
It is a big chunk, but I've talked to some people who, let's just say they are a connected dots, that told me that it didn't matter to them if it was 250 or 300 million. If it's the right guy, that's what they'll spend to bring him in.
Okay. Mike Detillier, WWL Radio TV New Orleans. He joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. LSU, Florida. Let's go there first. Jayden Daniels. For whatever reason, Heisman voters don't like to vote somebody in unless they're like a one-loss team or undefeated. But Jayden has been unbelievable this year. What was your reaction to his performance Saturday night against Florida?
Well, I'm old enough. I saw Burt Jones at LSU. I watched Tom Hodson, who actually grew up maybe a half mile from my home, play at LSU, and Jamarcus Russell was tremendous at LSU. Joe Burrow was just fantastic in 2019. That game against Florida, I've never seen a quarterback play a better game in Tiger Stadium. Yeah, I mean, I think it was singularly the best performance I've ever seen in Tiger Stadium. What Jayden Daniels did in that game. But he's been like that all season long. He's put up almost Madden-type numbers just about every week. And he's carried this team on his back because their defense is so damn bad. He deserves to be in New York. I think he's the best player in college football, and he deserves to be the Heisman Trophy winner. There have been precedents where a team, a player on a team that's had multiple losses and won it. We saw RG3 do it at Baylor. We saw Lamar Jackson at Louisville do it. And so there has been some precedent of that. I've watched Bo Nix play at Oregon and Michael Penix Jr. play at Washington. Two very good players in college football. No, I'm not. That's not even a debate. Best player in college football is Jayden Daniels at LSU. Bottom line.
Okay. Well, and they could, Mike. They could lose. I mean, look, A&M's got an interim coach. That's usually a disaster. But they could still. I mean, A&M still got players. That'd be devastating. Bottom line, that'd be devastating if LSU lost that game, right?
I agree. You should take care of business. There's a lot of dislike between one another.
Yeah.
There. That goes back a few years between the two schools. And, okay, LSU plays Georgia State this weekend. I don't know how long Jayden Daniels is going to play in that game. I would suspect, he's not going to be playing in the fourth quarter. Put it to you that way. So I think that final game will have a lot to say with him. But all season long, it has not mattered who he's played. Other than the opener against Florida State, which he played very well. He had 6 drop passes in that game. So he has really been at an unbelievable pace and what he's done this year. Bobby and I were doing the show last night. I told him, when Joe Burrow left that field for the final time, I told people I don't know in my lifetime if I'll see anybody that could match the performance of what that offense and Burrow did. In just a blink of an eye, I saw it with Jayden Daniels. I sort of wondered a little bit because this university has not, throughout the years, really produced a lot of big-time quarterbacks. It really hasn't.
That's a good point.
We talk about Burt and Tom and Jamarcus. That's a lot of stretch in that time frame.
That's right.
But there's not much time between Burrow and Jayden Daniels.
Right.
And so, man, you watching something special here with this young man. Both transfer portal people. And so that's the world of college football today. It didn't work out for Jayden at Arizona State, and he comes here. And last year, that was sort of a rocky road for him. He flashed it as a passer. This year, he's been able to piece it together as both a runner and a passer. Does anybody throw a deeper ball better than him?
No.
You watch him throw a football. deep downfield. That's been the big difference from a year ago. Last year, I don't know if the situation was he didn't quite trust himself in throwing the deep ball or trust his receivers. He's got great trust in them now. And, boy, he's got a tandem in Brian Thomas Jr. and Malik Neighbors that, I was here for Jefferson and Jamar. And you look at what these two guys are putting up numbers-wise. It's amazing. It's like mirror image, despite the fact Joe Burrow and Jayden Daniels are two different type players out on the field. But the numbers are just staggering what Daniels has been able to do this year. So the only thing is Joe had a better defense around him.
Yes, he did.
Man, this defense here,
and
LSU
Dave Aranda is
absolutely terrible.
Excellent as a defensive coordinator, too. He may not get it done at Baylor as a head coach, but that dude can flat out run a defense. He is Mike Detillier, WWL Radio TV New Orleans. He joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Mike D always weighing in on LSU Saints, but national stuff too. Mike, one of our listeners picked up earlier that you said, I don't think that's where Lane ends up. So if you, and it could be 3 years from now, where do you see Lane ascending to at some point, possibly?
My thought has always been that it's going to be one of two things with Lane. Either a return to the NFL, because that didn't work out too well the first time with the Raiders. And I get it, man. It was a disaster there. And you were dealing with a genius that had gotten older in Al Davis. You were having to put up with him. And that's sometimes, and I wouldn't say that about a lot of people, that they were genius-like, but I think Al was. But as he got older, he wasn't quite as sharp as he was certainly younger in his life. A return to the NFL, I think, is certainly something for an owner with a lot of money possible. The other part is when Nick Saban leaves Alabama, you better be able to find someone that's not going to be meek to walk into that place and fill those moccasins. Wouldn't Lane feel like he's the guy? And his success at Ole Miss tells it all.
It's incredible. He's had a great run.
How good he's been at Ole Miss. And so if I'm Alabama and over the next couple of years, and who knows with Nick, I don't think Nick's going to have this that much longer. I could see him coach another couple of years, but let's say he coaches 2 more years at Alabama or another year at Alabama, whatever. You're going to have to bring in someone who really sort of fights everything outside the perimeter of the reality of taking over for the greatest college football coach ever, and feels as though they're that good. I think Lane would fit that bill. Because you better bring in somebody whose ego is pretty healthy and has a track record of winning.
True.
Because, man, that is a lot of pressure put on you. Tremendous to fill in those moccasins of Saban. And so I think it'll be one of two things. Either an NFL team will come a-calling, or when Nick walks, Alabama will come a-calling. I think he really wanted the LSU job. I think Scott, he sort of didn't fit what Scott was looking for as a coach. I think Scott wanted a little older coach. And so, but to me, if we're talking about it today, I think an NFL team or Alabama for Lane Kiffin. Somewhere down the road.
Right.
Okay?
Sure.
And who knows when that time frame comes. You never know when that doorbell gets rung for you. And timing is everything in life.
You're right about that. It is all about timing. Mike Detillier, WWL Radio TV New Orleans on the Farm Bureau Insurance Guest Line. All right, Mike D, we appreciate it. Thanks, man.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it, Bo.
At Mike Detillier on Twitter, and a little bit of LSU and Jayden Daniels. He believes he's the best player in the country. Impressive what Jayden Daniels has been able to do transferring from Arizona State to LSU, and Bo Nix from Auburn to Oregon.
LSU's record with transfers, I mean, Paul Skeens, Joe Burrow, Jayden Daniels,
wow.
Even their women's basketball national champion, the Angel Reese.
True.
I mean, LSU might be the king of transfers.
You just made a great point. Joe Burrow, Paul Skeens, and the LSU women's hoops team. Wow.
And Jayden Daniels.
And Jayden Daniels. Although they could finish 9-3, which I'm reading their boards. They're all upset over their season. But he has had an amazing season. He didn't know that his defense was going to be 106th in the country.
Yeah. You can't do anything about that.
I'd have lost a lot of money if you'd have walked in and said that to me in the day before Labor Day weekend. And I'd have been like, okay, well, let's bet.
Yeah.
And you'd have been like, okay, let's bet. And I'd been like, let me see how much cash I can get today. And that's how much I want to put in. And you would be sitting here going, Bo, they're outside the top 100.
I mean,
if defensive scoring efficiency.
If he doesn't win, his defense owes him a Heisman.
What? Yeah, that's a good point on Skeens. Burrow's the best they've ever had, but he doesn't have the longevity.
Right. He's got that one Cam Newton season.
Yeah. I mean, the year before they were getting
good.
It together, and then boom. Now, granted, he had Jamar and Jordan.
In a defense.
Yeah, and Dave
Patrick
Aranda.
Queen.
I'm not taking anything away from Burrow. He's really good. But I don't know if you ever had anything like that in college football, where you had elite talent, top 3 recruiter. You had Ogeron, who was a recruiting maniac. Okay, so he got that whole deal. You had Joe Brady and Joe Burrow and Chase and Jefferson, among others. And then over here, you had Dave Aranda, who is a 5-star defensive coordinator as a play caller. My goodness.
The talent, too.
I was at that national championship game in New Orleans. It's kind of like my mark right before COVID.
Oh, yeah, because I took
January. A road trip down to New Orleans, me and Jeff Jones with Wickers and Jones EQ. He got me in a suite. I mean, I had no business being in a suite. And we had a great time for a couple of nights. And the game was, Clemson owned the first quarter, and then LSU just put the hammer down. And that's when it really jumped out to me. I was like, this team's unbelievable. It was like they just flipped. They just went, oh, we have to turn it on. They dominated Clemson and Trevor Lawrence. That was a good Clemson team. We forget that. Oh, man. Hour number 3 coming up of the Out of Bounds Show, 105.9 The Zone, ESPN.